All right. I guess the mic is on. I think we're getting ready to start, so if folks could take their seats, we can get started. They can close the doors in the back. A few more folks still coming in, so let's just give them a minute to get in and get seated. Okay, as a good regulator, we always like to start on time and stay on time. So we'll get started this afternoon. So first of all, good afternoon, everybody. And please welcome to the Advancing U.S. Nuclear Energy Global Leadership technical session for the afternoon. My name is Dave Skeen. I am the director here of the NRC's Office of International Programs. And it is my great pleasure to be joined here today by Ms. Ann Ganser, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary at the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation. And also Dr. Mike Goff, who is the Acting Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. So before we begin our discussions today, I would first like to cover some of the ground rules here and the logistics for the afternoon. So as a reminder, the Wi-Fi code for this afternoon here at the conference is NRC RIC 2025, all capital letters, NRC RIC, R-I-C, 2025. So that will get you into the Wi-Fi. And please remember for the session to silence your electronic devices so we don't have the phones going off. And also, you keep in mind that all of our sessions are recorded and can be viewed later on our website. So for today's session, there will be no live Q&A session as part of our panel discussion. However, we will incorporate some live polling questions along the way for us to hear from you, all of you out there, so it will inform our discussion as we go along. For those of you who are in the room, the slide that will show the polling question will include instructions for the participants to text their responses. And so the in-person folks should text the code next to their choice to this number, 22333. That's 22333. For those of us who are joining us virtually, once you have logged on to the virtual conference platform and joined this session, then there is a tab for live polling questions. Responses from both in-person and virtual participants flow into the same queue, so our polling results will reflect the total responses of folks both virtually and in the room. Additionally, at the end of today's session, you will be invited to scan the feedback QR code and share any thoughts or insights you may have pertaining to this particular session, or to the conference in general for that matter. As a reminder, you will need to log into the platform using the email that you provided when you registered for the RIC. And also for our virtual audience, please click on the feedback tab to the right of this session's video window to provide your feedback. So thank you for that. Okay, now that we're all done with the logistics and a little bit of housekeeping, I'm going to kick off the session this afternoon by sharing a little bit of information about the NRC's international activities in the context of this panel for advancing global leadership. So the NRC has had a very robust international program since the agency's inception back in 1975. For the purpose of today's panel, I'd like to focus on our long-standing engagement with the executive branch and how the NRC coordinates its international activities to meet the broader U.S. government objectives. So in the early days of the agency, the United States was actively exporting reactor technology overseas. And the NRC worked closely with the executive branch colleagues to issue our export licenses for many of the pressurized water reactors and boiling water reactors around the world today. This cooperative relationship has remained strong for the last 50 years, and we continue to actively work with the executive branch as we consider the next phase of potential reactor exports. That includes large reactors, small modular reactors, and advanced reactor technologies. So then in the early 1990s, at the executive branch's request, the NRC established an important partnerships with our regulatory colleagues in Eastern Europe. And this was after the fall of the former Soviet Union. And we worked closely with them to help strengthen the nuclear safety and security in that region of the world. We are proud that these partnerships have endured and been strengthened in the decades that followed. And several of our partners from Eastern Europe are here at the RIC this week. So moving forward 10 years, following the September 11 terrorist attacks in 2001, radioactive source safety and security became a very high priority as the world considered the threat of a potential radioactive dirty bomb. So if these materials would fall into the wrong hands of malicious actors, it could be a problem for folks all over the world, including the United States. So to fulfill both of our national security and global security objectives, the NRC expanded its capacity building at that time to work in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia so that we could help regulators in those regions develop and maintain radioactive source inventories in order to prevent those sources from being lost or stolen and falling into the wrong hands. So when the Fukushima accident occurred in Japan in 2011, the NRC then joined a team of U.S. emergency responders based at the embassy in Tokyo to not only work closely and support our Japanese colleagues at the time, but also to provide informed guidance to U.S. citizens, including both civilian and military personnel who were living in Japan after the accident. Our relationship with the Japanese remains one of the NRC's strongest partnerships today, and we are pleased to continue to work closely with our Japanese regulatory counterparts as the country continues to bring reactors back online and also decommissioning at Fukushima Daiichi and other older sites, but also as they begin to think about and considering deploying new reactor technologies in their country. So most recently, as more and more countries are considering purchasing U.S. reactor technology to expand their nuclear power programs, the NRC has leveraged our close relationships with our regulatory partners in Canada, the United Kingdom, Poland, and Romania, and others, so that we can optimize the licensing process and share information that can facilitate streamlining regulatory reviews. While the NRC does not explicitly promote nuclear power, we do promote nuclear safety and security. And these engagements with our partner countries enable us to look at the safe and secure use of nuclear energy so that they are consistent with today's broader U.S. government objectives to reassert U.S. dominance in the global nuclear market and limit the influence of our adversaries. So as the title of our session today suggests, the passage of the ADVANCE Act in 2024 represents the next chapter of our long-standing cooperation with our executive branch colleagues. Specifically, Section 101 of the Act directs the NRC to conduct and coordinate interagency and international regulatory capacity building activities to support international nuclear export and innovation efforts. The Act also requires the NRC to continue its close engagement with other federal agencies, including our two closest partners who are up here on the stage with me today. As we look to a future in which the United States may not only deploy large nuclear reactors, but also small modular reactors and microreactors and possibly floating nuclear power plants, as well as other advanced technologies, the NRC's partnership with our sister agencies in the executive branch is more important than ever. So together, our agencies can leverage our collective relationships with foreign government ministries and regulators and other stakeholders in the target countries that we look at to achieve the administration's nuclear energy policy objectives. So now you've heard a little bit from me about the NRC's role in the international activities. I'd like to turn to my distinguished colleagues here today to hear from them. So we will first hear from my good colleague, Ann Ganser, and she will highlight the Department of State's international nuclear energy priorities. Ann, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you all. Thank you for coming today. I'm Ann Ganser. I am the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Security and Nonproliferation at the State Department. That frequently raises eyebrows. What does civil nuclear energy have to do with international security and nonproliferation? Well, because of the presence of nuclear material, because of the Treaty on the Nonproliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the importance of the International Atomic Energy Agency, all of the civil nuclear energy cooperation falls to us at the State Department. So that's why I am here and not my colleagues from the Bureau of Energy Resources. They do everything else. So if you want to talk about your grid or something else, you've got to talk to them. But on nuclear, you're stuck with me. So what we do in ISN, first of all, we leverage our abilities our diplomatic abilities in civil nuclear energy. The current administration has identified its priorities, and we look at everything through that lens. We make America safer from nuclear threats. We strengthen the United States through competitiveness in advanced energy technologies, and we expand U.S. prosperity by facilitating civil nuclear industry options abroad. Our role in ISN is to advance global nonproliferation and protect U.S. innovation. We do this through things like strong export controls. We review export licenses. We ensure that when we are working with countries on civil nuclear projects, that they are looking to establish and follow the highest standards of safety, security, that they follow IAEA safeguards. I like to call that the 3 S's, safety, security, safeguards. That has to be the mantra. And also non-proliferation, that the energy equipment, that the nuclear material is going to stay where it is, and if it does move, it will be under appropriate authority and with appropriate safeguards. So civil nuclear diplomacy is particularly important given the president's emphasis on energy in his agenda. It seems like everyone is looking for all kinds of sources of energy. I know the secretary spoke about, your secretary spoke about LNG, liquid natural gas, spoke about coal and others, but everyone is looking for a good mix. None of us can rely on just one source of energy. And so there is great interest abroad in nuclear technology. So we work with foreign countries. Sometimes it is an industry prompt that starts us to talk to them. Sometimes the country approaches us. But we look at how we can work with other countries to advance their nuclear energy projects. We're diplomats, we negotiate agreements, right? One of the most important agreements we negotiate and we work with our colleagues on is what we call in shorthand a 1-2-3 agreement. These are nuclear cooperation agreements required by the Atomic Energy Act, Section 123, that's the name. These establish the conditions for the transfer of nuclear material. We have also negotiated intergovernmental agreements that tend to be specific to a project. These are frequently sought by the foreign country for whatever purposes they have. They frequently have legal requirements to have agreements like this to proceed with cooperation. And so we have developed essentially a template, and we have negotiated, I think 4 of these are signed and in force, and we have others underway. We also introduced a less formal instrument that we call a Nuclear Cooperation Memorandum of Understanding, or an NCMOU. This is more a political statement that we want to work with a country, and it will be on a whole range of nuclear issues. It may be because they are seeking civil nuclear energy, but sometimes it's more for nuclear medicine or other things. We try and wrap that all in. This is a statement, a policy statement between our 2 countries that we want to work together. And in fact, it was kind of a big accomplishment for my bureau that it was the first thing that our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, signed on his first trip abroad. He signed a nuclear cooperation MOU with El Salvador. So of course, now there's lots more interest in Latin America in civil nuclear energy. So it's going to keep us busy. Civil nuclear energy is important. The future is going to need a lot of energy, and no one source is going to provide all that. And so we are working with countries to make sure that if they seek a nuclear energy solution, of course, we prefer it to be our US technology. We've got some great technology out there. But even if they select another provider, we need to make sure that they do it safely, securely, that they're working with the IAEA, and that they have signed all of the necessary international agreements that cover nuclear energy. We think nuclear is an important part of the energy mix, We think it's important to get U.S. standards for safety and security and safeguards out there. We think U.S. has the best technology, so we want to work with other countries to expand their ability to incorporate nuclear energy in their mix. It makes America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. But more importantly, to me anyway, it shows that America can get it done. It shows our energy leadership. It provides economic growth for both us and the country we're working with. And it shows that we are doing it right. That nuclear is safe, that it's secure, that it's safeguarded. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ann. And next, we will hear from our good friend here, Dr. Mike Goff. Mike?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the NRC's 37th Annual Nuclear Regulatory Information Conference. That's a lot of conferences there. I want to thank Dave's office, the Office of International Programs, and especially Dave for bringing us together on this panel at this exciting time for nuclear energy. It really is an honor to be here on this panel with Dave and Ann. While we often run into each other at other countries around the world here, it's great to actually share the stage at home here as well and not have to travel quite as far to get here. But still address the important topic, how do we support our international partners moving forward on nuclear energy as well? An essential part of our efforts to advance the deployment of U.S. technology globally is the action that we take to deploy it domestically in the United States. The Trump administration is committed to advancing its bold energy agenda by unleashing American energy and prosperity through affordable, reliable, and secure energy. As expressed by my Secretary of Energy, Secretary Wright, nuclear energy will play an important role, and we must unleash commercial nuclear power in the United States and abroad. So again, we're doing this not just for domestically, but for internationally as well, but we've got to be successful domestically to be successful internationally as well. The revitalization of the U.S. nuclear energy was a strong focus of the first Trump administration. And now we have an opportunity to lead in the commercialization of affordable and abundant nuclear energy around the world. Under this administration, the Department of Energy will work diligently and creatively to enable the rapid domestic deployment of nuclear energy in the United States. Through activities such as the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program and our Generation 3 Small Modular Reactor Program, we are working to speed the demonstration of all types of advanced reactors, from Generation 3 plus light water reactors to Generation 4 reactors, and do this in a cost-shared partnership with the U.S. industry. The Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program aims to support the deployment of advanced reactors by addressing licensing, construction, and operational risk that come with building the first-of-a-kind technologies. Currently, the demonstration program within the ARDP program is backed by more than $2.5 billion in funding. And it is supporting 2 demonstrations currently within the United States, supporting TerraPower's Natrium reactor and X-Energy's Xe-100 reactor as well. We are additionally working to lower technical risk on 8 other designs from various companies, including Kairos, Holtec, Westinghouse, BWXT, Southern Company, General Atomics, ARC, and MIT. The Generation 3 plus small modular reactor program will help accelerate the demonstration of Generation 3 plus nuclear reactor technologies, bridging the gap between our current fleet of reactors, which is operating safely and very efficiently, and more advanced reactors as well. This Generation 3 plus program will be funded in 2 tiers. The first will provide up to $800 million to support up to 2 first movers of utility reactor vendor and construction company and end users to deploy that first plant, while also working to enable them to develop that crucial order book, because we want to quickly get from first-of-a-kind cost to nth-of-a-kind cost. The second tier of that work under that Generation 3 plus small modular reactor program is $100 million to spur forward SMR deployments and address key gaps that have hindered some of the deployment activities, such as some of the work on the design, licensing, supplier development, and site preparations. So we look forward to, hopefully, in the near future, moving forward in that program that's already received solicitations for awardees. Together, these two programs have access to billions of dollars in government funding to accelerate U.S. technology, which will be vital in exporting the next generation of U.S. nuclear technology. We need to be able to demonstrate it here so we can export it as well. So as already noted, our work to unleash commercial nuclear power domestically is also critical for our efforts to export U.S. technology internationally, to enable our allies and partners to also enjoy the benefits and security provided from this resilient energy source. International collaborations are really crucial. As an example, the Office of Nuclear Energy works with our historic partners like the United Kingdom, Japan, Canada, France, and others, as well as other emerging energy countries as well, on civil nuclear energy research and development and capacity building activities as well. One of the focus areas that our office has in the Department of Energy has been through the establishment of Regional Energy Training Centers, or RETCs, to train the next generation of nuclear professionals critical to expanding nuclear power globally. We have established 2 of these centers. The first was in Poland, and it was to serve that critical region in Europe. The second was in Ghana to serve much of the African continent. I should note that we appreciate the support of our colleagues here from the NRC and state, and I should also acknowledge USTDA as well in supporting our efforts on these centers. We're trying to do this as an all-of-government approach, and we do appreciate the collaboration on that. In Poland, the establishment of the Regional Training Center and the bilateral partnership enhanced by its creation is a testament to the fact that the U.S.-Poland relationship specifically goes beyond just the selection of U.S. technology, in this case where they selected the AP1000 to deploy, but it also goes into the commitment that we have to work together to develop our resources and capabilities in the country as we look to further Poland to benefit from that technology. So as Poland takes its first steps to build its first nuclear power plants, the United States and Poland are in lock sync as far as working to develop those capabilities and enable Poland to reap the benefits of that technology. With respect to Poland, we held our first kickoff meeting in Warsaw in April, and a subsequent meeting on the supply chain in December. So again, a lot of training activities, which again, we appreciate folks from the NRC especially coming over and helping in those training activities. Our team recently brought together the training center groups from Ghana and Poland and had a meeting at Oak Ridge just this past week to develop plans for the coming year and see how we can have synergies between the 2 different training centers and where we want to expand our training centers as well in the near future. Our office also, as part of the training centers, we held our second U.S.-Africa Nuclear Energy Summit under the auspices of the Ghana Clean Energy Regional Training Center in Kenya this past August. Again, this was the second of those activities that we've had on the continent. I think the first one we had in Ghana, we had 500 people. The second one in Kenya, we had 800 participation, a lot of state participation there as well. And also we were very happy to have Chairman Wright from the NRC at both of those events as well. So we do appreciate a lot of the collaboration. Those USANES, I'm not sure I like that acronym or not, but the U.S. Africa Nuclear Energy Symposium have been critical in deepening our relationships between the United States, the U.S. nuclear industry, and the continent of Africa, which will be vital for nuclear energy expansion in the future here. As a sign of progress in deepening these relationships, at the most recent training event, Regnum, a U.S. nuclear project developer, and Ghana did sign a cooperation agreement as well for the deployment of nuclear technology. I should also note, we're also strongly engaged with our colleagues from Romania as they work to expand their nuclear energy capacity further through the refurbishment and completion of their CANDU reactors at Cernavoda, and at the eventual deployment of the NuScale small modular reactor at Doicești as well. This project is a good example of how we can work together, not just from the United States, but also with other allied countries as well to help deploy in Romania as well. So again, it does require international cooperation sometimes beyond just 2 countries. Our office is also leading the international work on the fuel market through our strategic partnership that we've termed the SAPURO 5 partnership between the United States, Canada, France, Japan, and the United Kingdom. Through our collective efforts, the SAPURO 5 has shifted from commitments to helping the fuel supply to actually moving toward investments, where we have from those partner nations agreed to invest up to $5.6 billion through government-led investments to help ensure that we have a secure, resilient, global commercial nuclear fuel market for both the current and the future fleet of reactors. So looking ahead, we, or me personally, I can only see an increase in the global demand for nuclear energy. And as such, now is really the time that we need to accelerate leadership in the international nuclear collaboration market and unleash U.S. nuclear technology to the world and to our partners. To succeed in these strategic engagements, we must use a Team USA approach, a whole-of-government approach, to help work with our partners again to make sure that we can expand civil nuclear energy globally. We need to have access to DOE's technical know-how, states' diplomacy, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's robust international regulatory engagement. At DOE, we stand ready to work with partners that are interested in U.S. technologies to meet their energy security needs. Again, I want to express my thanks to the NRC for bringing this panel together and look forward to questions here. Thanks.
All right, well, thanks, Mike, and Ann, appreciate kind of the introduction here. And clearly, if we do want the U.S. to regain our global leadership in nuclear energy, I think it does take it takes a village, as they say. So it's the three of us plus a myriad of U.S. agencies, including trade. So, yeah, so appreciate the responses. Now we're going to get into the polling questions here. So I think you see the first question is up on the screen. And we'll give you a few minutes to respond to this. I'll read it out for you as you folks are looking and deciding which selection you want. So the question is, what do you see as the most important aspect of global nuclear energy leadership? And the potential responses are the reactor technology deployment, independent regulatory infrastructure, capacity building efforts, or high standards of safety and security nonproliferation. So I'm looking at the results, and it looks like the A and D are in a race there, but it looks like A is ahead right now. So give it just a minute or two, and we'll move on here. D caught up and went ahead.
Oh, now they're A and D are tied.
So I think we have two clear ahead of the other, so maybe we can touch on those as we talk through this. So let me take the first shot at this one. So I'll start by saying that at the NRC, a prime example of where we are with helping with the deployment of the technology would be our ongoing and very long relationship we've had with Poland. As we were in there, gosh, I guess it was 2015 or 2016 that we ran our first, we called it an advanced licensing exercise project. And the idea behind that was to work with the Polish regulator at the time to kind of give them a feel for what does it take to review a license application. And so we let them pick the reactor that they wanted to look at, and they came back to us and said they'd like to look at the AP1000 of all things. And we asked, why is that? And they said, well, because the NRC is open and transparent and all of your documents are online. It's very easy for us to get to the information. And so we can do our mock review, if you will, based on the information that's out there. So we worked with them for probably 2 or 3 years to work through that, to give them an idea of what it takes to license a large project like that. So fast forward to later, in the last couple of years, we've been working very closely with our Polish colleagues as they staff up and they begin to train and hire people. We've had several folks come to the NRC for personnel exchanges, not only in headquarters, but out in the regions to see how we inspect and enforce what we do every day to oversee the nuclear plants in the United States. So I think that's been a very good way of bringing the Polish regulator along. And so they're doing very well, and they're preparing to get an application. I think in 2026 is when the application is supposed to come in, and we'll continue to support them as they go forward to look at their first nuclear power plant. So that would be my take on this. So let me turn to the panelists and see what their thoughts are as well. So I don't
You
know,
want to go?
whichever one wants to go first.
I'll
Go
be
ahead.
happy to. Okay, I'm glad, being a techno geek, I'm glad A's kind of inched ahead a little bit, because I do like technology. I do think the technology is very important, and I will say, I come from the national labs, my background's the national labs. I think we really do have a great innovation environment within the United States. I think our public-private partnership, being able to innovate from both private and public and university, really does enable us to develop truly great technologies as far as moving forward. So I think we do have very good technologies. We have a plethora of technologies out there as well. As I mentioned, we have stuff from Generation 3+, multiple designs of a light water reactor, Generation 3+, to Generation 4, whether it's high temperature gas reactors, sodium cooled reactors, molten salt cooled reactors. We have a lot of good designs, and then the large AP1000 as well, which I got to admit, I'm still always surprised at how great that reactor is actually working too, that it's already got 92% capacity factor for a new reactor is pretty phenomenal. So I think technology is one of the great things. But I guess going with the question there, how do you define global nuclear energy leadership? I think if it's truly leadership, though, is we got to have all of those areas. It can't be just one of them. So as much as I like the technology, I got to recognize we've got to have a strong, we've got to work with countries to help stand up the strong independent regulator as well. We've got to help in the capacity building efforts as well. And we've got to make sure that we do maintain a high standards for safety, security, and non-proliferation as well. So it's not, we can't just do one and be the leader. We've got to be able to do all of those things and be the leader. So that's why I think it's very important for us to come together and work together as a unit here to address the non-proliferation issues, the regulatory issues, and the technology issues. And I think we have that capability to be able to move forward and help partners move forward on those areas.
Yeah, no, I would agree with pretty much everything Mike just said. I am often awed by our technology. Now, he's got insider information, so it's bigger that he's awed by our technology. But we do have lots of advanced technology to share, but we're not just trying to sell it. We're telling countries that, okay, if you want to work with nuclear, there's certain rules of the road here, that when we negotiate our nuclear cooperation agreements, our 1, 2, 3 agreements, that they understand just how seriously we take this all, that we want them to have, or we insist on them having comprehensive safeguards agreements with the International Atomic Energy Agency. There are a whole host of other international agreements regarding nuclear energy that we introduce them to. Again, agree with you on the independent regulator that that's an important part, but also that they have to be able to regulate, that they have to be able to manage a nuclear program. And Mike talked briefly about this, but one thing I've pushed a lot of countries on as well is that if everybody who's told me they want to build a nuclear reactor does, there won't be enough people to operate them. So that you also have to work on educating your own workforce, developing the workforce, so that when your reactor is built, you've got people that can operate it, and they're skilled, and they know how to do it, and they will do it safely, securely, and under those high standards of safeguards and non-proliferation that I've mentioned. And so I think that's how we demonstrate leadership, is showing the whole package, showing that it's not just one thing or another, that we're not just selling you something and walking away, that this is an important relationship to us, and that we are going to do it right. We've got the technology, we've got the people, we've got the know-how. We can teach you how to do things like regulate it, like follow the safety guidelines, to develop a culture of safety and security around your nuclear reactor. Give your people confidence that this nuclear energy is not just going to keep the lights on, but it's going to be safe, that they don't have to be worried about it. And so I think that's how we demonstrate leadership.
All right. Thanks for that. And so I guess, are we ready to move on to the next question? Okay, yep, polling question 2 is up. So again, I'll read it out for you. Beyond Central and Eastern Europe, what region of the world would you like to see more U.S. government nuclear energy engagement? And they give you choices of Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa, or Latin America and the Caribbean. So we'll see what we get out of this one. It's interesting. It's kind of three areas are
Yeah.
getting a lot of votes. Okay, I think we see a clear trend here. So it looks like 3 out of the 4 regions are quite popular. So maybe, Ann, I'll turn to you first on this one. So if you could share a little bit about how do you think State Department targets your outreach to different parts of the world, and how do you determine where we should put our efforts in?
Well, looks like Africa is the winner from what I'm seeing on the chart that's in front of us here.
Yeah.
So it looks like I've got more work to do. Mike has already mentioned a couple of the conferences we've had in Africa, and I have attended and spoken at a couple of those conferences, and I have worked hard with Ghana, particularly on that training center we stood up. But I think there is a lot of interest in Africa. Many of these countries are looking particularly for more economic development. And so the two are going to have to go hand in hand. They need the energy for the economic development, but they're going to need the economic development to pay for the energy. So that's how I look at Africa, but I have already done some work there. But like I said, based on your poll here, I think I'm going to have to do a lot more. Latin America and the Caribbean, as I said, our secretary that was where he went on his first trip. He signed a nuclear cooperation MOU with El Salvador, and so now the interest from Latin America is coming in. There are some countries in Latin America that have nuclear energy or that have research reactors and the like, so there is some experience with nuclear there that we have been working with and trying to leverage to build a broader coalition, if you want to call it that, in Latin America of the countries that are interested in nuclear energy. So we can work there. We've done a lot of work in Southeast Asia over the past couple of years because they have been approaching us, expressing their interest, particularly in small modular reactors. When you get to these island nations, a lot of them don't physically have a place to put a large reactor like an AP1000. And so they are eagerly watching the development of small modular reactors, seeing those as potential. And so we have done a lot of work in Southeast Asia, have negotiated some 1, 2, 3 agreements. I think last year we signed agreements with Singapore, with the Philippines. We have one that recently was submitted in Thailand. So there is a lot of potential there. And so, as I said, there's a lot of work to be done, but just from my perspective, we're always looking for the demand signal. We don't just go and try and talk to a country about nuclear energy if they haven't expressed an interest, or if maybe our industry hasn't expressed an interest. Doesn't necessarily come to us. Sometimes it goes to David or Mike or others in the US government. But if you are interested in a particular market, come and talk to us, because that's how we know we need to engage. There is great interest in some places. Others, they're all kind of waiting and watching and seeing what their partners do. But I do think that frequently when we will go in and talk to one country in a region, others will start to pay attention, and they will get interested. And I think when we actually deploy a reactor or one of these training centers, that also sparks interest. And so, as I said, we're already doing some work in these regions, more in some than in others. But if we have that demand signal, we will engage.
All right, thanks. Mike?
Yeah, as noted, we do a lot of work. We've done a lot of work right now in Africa, and I think that is very critical. And in fact, one thing I'll note that Secretary Wright has stressed, there is one of the focus on this energy dominance issue in the U.S. is really to solve the issue of energy poverty. And Africa, that is a major issue. It's needed for economic development. So that is critical to be able to bring up the standard of living there as well. So that has been one of the reasons we have focused there, that we would like to try to work to be able to bring up the overall standard of living and bring up the overall economy of these regions as well. The one thing I'll also note, and I'll go back the techno-geek kind of thing, the one thing that we have a benefit now with nuclear technology that we didn't necessarily 10 years ago is there are a lot of different options now. So it's not just we're trying to sell a gigawatt-sized reactor to a country that may have a grid that's 2 gigawatts, which would be kind of hard to place that gigawatt size reactor there. We have a lot of different technologies. We have the small modular reactors that are anything less than 300 megawatts. So there are technologies now that are more right-sized, especially except for island nations and such as well, that opens up this technology to places where you might not have thought about it deploying it 10 years ago or so, just because of the grid and the electricity needs. We also have micro reactors as well that could help, especially on island nations and all. So that does open up a lot more options on where we can look at deploying the technology. Also, so from an economic point of view too, as well, that you don't have to pay multi-billion dollars necessarily for, which could be challenging for some of these countries to deploy that. You can deploy systems that are going to be smaller and more cost effective as well for them. So I think, again, with the technology options that we have right now, it's much easier to look and see what is the right technology for different countries, because there are a lot of different options out there for them. In fact, sometimes when we work with countries, one of the challenges is getting people to focus on different technologies, one versus the other. So, but I think that again does give us a lot of opportunity. And again, I think would like to work across all those areas. I think we focused a lot in Africa. We've done a little bit in Southeast Asia and a little bit in the Middle East as well. But the Latin America is, again, a ripe area, because there's a lot. In fact, one of our Latin American countries is developing a small modular reactor of their own that they're looking at deploying as well. There's the lessons learned that we can have from working with some of our partners in South America and all as well. So I think it's good to highlight these different areas, but I do stress what Ann says. There's a lot. We focus our efforts based on a number of signals. The country's providing signals to us, the company's providing signals to us that they see an opportunity there as well. So do reach out to us. Let us know where you have things that you want us to be able to focus on, and then we can see, can we focus on those areas as well. So.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I guess from NRC's side, so we've been in Latin America, Caribbean for a number of years, more on the materials side of the house than reactors, and we're just seeing more interest in the reactor side here in the last few years. But so we already have some established relationships with the regulators there, which is a good thing, as they look to expand or maybe deploy nuclear plants in their countries as well. So the other places we're seeing the growth is similar to what you're seeing there. So Africa and Southeast Asia seem to be two of the regions where we're getting a lot more requests from regulators to go and work with them as well. So I think that's going to continue going forward. And the problem is we're increasing interest so fast. Do we have the resources to go to these different places, and how do you prioritize? What are you going to do, right? So sometimes I worry there's a risk of, if the U.S. government can't get into these areas, then, if there's an absence of U.S. presence in some of these areas, then we do have adversaries that are also in some of these regions and are doing work in those areas as well. So I think it's something that we need to take a look sometimes before there's a firm commitment to any kind of technology or whatever, to get in there and work with from our side, the regulators themselves, but certainly from the broader USG, to work with the different parts of their governments over there as well. So,
if I could just comment on that, when I travel to these countries, they always want to talk to you. Everyone knows that the NRC is the gold standard, and so I always tell them, reach out and get on their list, because they have limited resources, and if you want to work with them, you need to let them know quickly.
All right. And I did not pay her to say that, so I want everybody to know that. So, but thanks, Ann. No, and like I say, we try to get to the places we can, but we do depend on state and DOE, other parts of the government, to tell us where are the areas that we should be focusing. So I think this is a good thing, And as we go through in some of these countries, we want to make sure that the U.S. is there and has a presence, right? Because if not, as she said, the gold standard. There are some of our competitors, I would say, in some of the world, do not have the standards we have and do not push for the safety and make sure that you have an independent and competent regulator in those countries. So if the U.S. is not there, we don't want to get into a race to the bottom here, right? We want everybody to have high safety standards and good regulations. So So I did have one question. So we didn't talk much about the Middle East. Can either one of you talk a little bit about, are there any efforts in the Middle East? Are we thinking about going in there, or is there interest coming from there?
I don't want to, get ahead of policy processes,
Yeah.
but we are talking to a number of Middle East countries who are very interested. Again, it goes to that issue of the energy mix. A lot of them, even countries that are known for oil production and the like, are also looking at other forms of energy. And with economic development, particularly things like IT, data centers, and the like, the demand for power is increasing, globally, but particularly in the Middle East. So we are talking to a number of countries there about what they're looking for in nuclear energy. So we definitely are talking to the Middle East. That one is one where, as I said, countries have reached out to us, and we're responding.
Yeah, Mike?
And obviously with the UAE, there was a lot of work collaborating with the
Yes.
UAE as they were deploying the Baraka plant.
Yeah.
Using Korean technology, but a lot of U.S. technology associated with that as well. So there was a lot of collaboration, and there's still ongoing discussions and collaborations with them as well. So that they do provide a good opening to be able to come again a regional leader in that area.
Yeah. Oh, clearly, and that's a great point. And I know we have a great relationship with FANR, the regulators in UAE, and very good partners to work with, and they're a good regulator. So I think they can help in that area of the world too, right? As we look at different countries there. So. Yeah.
One other thing I was just going to mention too that your comment made me think about too is one thing we need to do better at is we need to be there before there's a tender. We need to be there as countries are thinking about this.
Yeah.
Again, and that's why we're trying to do more in the capacity building as well. We can't just be there right when you're about to do a tender and then it's almost like you might be too late. We need to be there more for capacity building, help with that assessment process, be there earlier than we have probably been sometimes in the past. So that's one thing we're trying to do more on.
Yeah, and I think we do a pretty good job of communicating, but as I said, a lot of times we're in countries very early because they're looking for source security, right? So we help them put their source inventories together, track where they might have lost or orphaned sources, and then DOE and NSA folks may help build a facility to store the lost or orphaned sources in a safe manner. So. And then before they've even thought about a nuclear power program, and sometimes not even a research reactor program, right? So that's a lot of times that's the next phase. But so yeah, I think we can get early signals if there is a government that's kind of thinking about nuclear. That you're right. The time to get in there is early rather than once they've already kind of gone down the path quite a bit. So okay. All right. Thanks. So I guess we would be ready to move to the next question at this point. So let's see. So I'll read it here just because I'm having a hard time seeing on that. But the third polling question is, what do you believe is the most significant obstacle in implementing the ADVANCE Act and deploying new U.S. nuclear technology overseas? And so it is stringent nonproliferation requirements, or financing, lack of diplomatic agreements, or U.S. government resources or policy restrictions. So we'll let that cook just a little bit there and see how folks are thinking here. We've got one quite a bit in the lead right now, so why am I not surprised at that answer? Okay, well, I think we got enough of a trend there that we can at least talk to that. So certainly U.S. government resources and policy restrictions, but financing also gets quite a bit of play too. So, so maybe Ann, or Mike, I'll go to you first on this one. Your work with Team USA and that kind of stuff. Can you share a little bit about how that group works together and ways that your department's thinking about implementing the ADVANCE Act?
Yeah. First of all, I'm a little surprised too. I got to admit, I thought financing was going to come up there as
I thought it would be a
as
bigger
well,
one,
but it's clear. All of those issues, all of those things are issues that have to be worked through. I mean, again, we do want to make sure as technologies are deployed that we do maintain high standards of nonproliferation and also, as Ann noted, safeguards and security and nonproliferation as well. That's important that we make sure that that's done. Obviously, these are not cheap technologies. There is a financing issue to be able to deploy these technologies. When these technologies are deployed internationally, these are truly long-term relationships. The technologies, we're looking at operating our plants now in the United States to at least 80 years, and that we haven't found a limit at that yet. So these are century-long relationships. So government-to-government agreements and arrangements like that are very important. And again, the policies that the government has going forward is more impactful than I necessarily would have thought as well, but it's an issue there as well. So one thing that we do in the federal government to try to resolve all of these issues is we do have this group that we call Team USA. It's led out of the Office of Nuclear Energy, but has co-leads from State Department and Department of Commerce as well. That we do bring truly the whole of government that's involved in the nuclear enterprise together on a very regular basis to try to address these issues. And when I say the whole of government, it is the whole of government to address these issues. We do bring, the NRC is part of this, so we're looking at regulatory issues and all as well. The NNSA is part of it, and state is part of it, looking at non-proliferation issues. The Exim Bank and the Development Finance Corporation and USTDA is part of it as well to look at the financing issues. And as far as the policy, though, we also bring in usually the National Security Council and the Office of Science and Technology policy from the White House. So we do bring these groups together to address what issues do we need to be working on. And it's also an inroads from where we can also start seeing where do we need to focus resources. I should also add, we usually add embassies onto the calls as well to again look at where are issues popping up that we need to be addressing. So we really are trying through Team USA to have a coordinated approach to how we help export U.S. technology to our allies and partners in an efficient manner. And again, start identifying where we can get involved early as well. So not, again, we shouldn't be waiting until someone's issued a tender for the technology. Where are countries looking at, where they're looking at considering technologies? So we can get involved with capacity building and all as well. So as they're starting to look at the technologies and deploy it, they're doing it in a nice, thoughtful manner as well. And then again, we can become a partner with them in that process. So I think that has been a very effective organization that we have. It could be more effective. We could work more, in a more coordinated manner. We need to continue to strive to do that. But it is an inroads for industry to get involved and again to help bring up where there are issues. Because we do have industry come in and participate as well to bring up where do they have issues, where do they want to see us deploy. It is inroads to help us prioritize where we want to focus resources as well. So I think it is a fairly effective. We want to continue to make it more and more effective, but it is a nice tool that we have because we truly do want this to be a whole of government approach to make sure that our allies and partners can deploy this technology as well safely and efficiently to meet their energy needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just from my perspective, that last one, it's U.S. government resources and policy restrictions is what it says, right? Yeah. I mean, in terms of government resources, I know we have done a lot of work with Exim and DFC, which I'm kind of guessing that's what they're talking about on the resources here, because for a very long time they could not fund nuclear projects. And so they have a lot of expertise in various other market areas, but this is one that, like I said, I've got some really good people on my team who have done a lot of work with them on educating them about nuclear and what goes into those projects and the things. And we have seen both of them issue some letters of interest, or I think they're letters of interest, right? Letters of intent?
Letters of intent, yeah.
Sorry, LOI. You know, I'm government. We use acronyms. I don't always remember what they stand for. But we have seen them do some. They have been a little bit cautious. I am hopeful that we will see a little bit more interest from them going forward, particularly given the administration's emphasis on energy and energy-related projects. I will say that one person from DFC also told me he was a little bit intimidated by how much nuclear projects cost. And we were like, you don't have to pay for the whole thing, you know. But so I do recognize that on the resources, there's more to be done there. And then, as you've already commented, that you can't work with everybody because you just don't have enough people. Resources also means people. I'm not completely sure what you mean by policy restrictions. I mean, you know, we didn't get a whole lot of people saying it's the lack of agreements. We do require those agreements before, like the 123 agreement, before we actually get to the export of nuclear material. But there's a lot that we can do in working with a company and with a country before we get to that point. But on restrictions, you know, there are a handful of countries we can't work with, but it's pretty limited, and we can work with a lot of countries around the world who are interested in nuclear energy. I agree financing is the challenge, and we're not financing people in international security and nonproliferation, but my people have done some brainstorming and have reached out to other parts of the government, other parts of, you know, and to industry as well. Kind of as I was saying in Africa, that many of these countries want nuclear energy for economic development, and in some cases, it's sort of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Well, if I have a nuclear reactor, they'll build an industrial park. It's kind of like, you know, the two things kind of need to go together. And so if we can marry up our nuclear industry with, say, you know, a company that wants to extract ores and do some high heat processing of them, those two might get started on that economic development, that the one feeds the other. So that is going to be a challenge, you know, making the business case for where the reactor makes sense. But, you know, as I said, not necessarily our thing in ISN, but maybe other parts of the State Department can work on the economic development piece, or they can work with other pieces of the US government. But we do recognize that that is the big challenge right now, is finding ways to finance nuclear reactors. So I think, like I said, if the lack of an agreement or a non-pro issue comes up, contact us. We're happy to work on it. You know, I don't have that big of a team that works on 123 agreements, but they've been producing. So we as I said, we got a couple of them signed recently, and there are more in the works. So we want to work with you on these things. And in terms of those policy restrictions, if it's something that I can work on, reach out and tell me which problem is, and we'll see if we can't find a way forward with it. So with that, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Ann and Mike. A good discussion. And I guess for us, certainly the resource limitations, right? And in fact, in the ADVANCE Act, not only did it say NRC, you should do more capacity building and be out there and doing this stuff, it actually gives us the authority to stand up a new branch, actually in my office, in the Office of International Programs, to work on capacity building and innovation of our exports, right? So, but I always tell everybody, the ADVANCE Act is really nice. It says that. It doesn't appropriate any funds for us to do that. So while it's a good goal to have, and we certainly strive for that, it depends on what kind of appropriations to get as to how far we can go down that path and how soon we can do it. So again, for us, there is some resource limitation, but I think we're doing okay now. We could do more. If we had more resources, we could go into more countries. But I think we hit the most high priority ones in working with our colleagues in the federal government today. But I don't know if you saw the chairman's session this morning that had all of the licenses that are coming down the road, right? In the next 2 or 3 years, the licenses that are coming here. And lots of people want to export those licenses. They're not just doing it for domestic purposes. So as that grows, I could see a reason for us to grow. And I know everybody always wants more resources, but that's something that if it really takes off, we will need some help with that to get into all the different places that people want to export now. And then the other thing I just wanted to touch on, the other thing we can do with we have to do the exports under Part 110. We actually export the Part 810 that DOE does. It gives the intellectual property that says you can transfer this technology, but Part 110, which the NRC owns, this is the physical components, right? The actual reactors and components and things that you have to do to get a reactor built in another country. So I think there's things we can do, and we've started down this path as well, as we're looking at more of the advanced designs, because most of our export licensing and our regulations in general were based on light water technology. So we're seeing some of these new exotic technologies that are on the boards and are coming are not necessarily light water based. So I think there's areas there where we can help and move forward a little bit in that area as well. And the non-proliferation piece, I guess we capture that through the 123s and the agreements that we have to have, right? So
when you mentioned the 110s and the 810s, just another piece there I wanted to mention is frequently you will hear that something is hung up at the State Department. That's because in some of these processes, we have to go to the other country and ask them for assurances that the nuclear equipment or technology or whatever it is will remain in peaceful uses. And so when you hear that something's been stuck at the State Department forever, it's usually because we're waiting on the other country. So, and in fact, there have been times when companies have called us and we said, well, could you tell your partner in the other country to get their government to send us the assurances? I don't know if that's one of the requirements or government processes that is causing frustration, but it frustrates us as well sometimes. And we recently got a DipNet from a country that didn't have a required sentence in it. It somehow dropped it, and so we had to go back and say, oh no, I'm sorry, you have to do this again. Yes. So sorry about that, but that could be one of the things that is causing some tension here, is that we aren't just sitting on it, we are waiting for the assurances from the other country. Yeah. And just something else you said about dealing with other countries and resources. If you are looking to go to do some work in a foreign country, I strongly encourage you to talk to the U.S. Embassy. Depending on the country, not completely sure. Usually the economic section or the commercial section will be the one to work with U.S. companies that are trying to break into a market, but they can provide you some help. And in a country I was in last fall, the industry had a reception, and the American Chamber of Commerce hosted the reception for the industry people that were there for the event. And they put in a strong pitch. Please also check in with your American Chamber of Commerce, if there is one in that country, that they can also help to open doors for you. So they asked me to pitch it, so I'm throwing it out there, that the AmCham might be able to help you as well. But please, we've got people in country. I can't always be there, Dave or Mike can't always be there, but the embassy will always have somebody there. And so please make sure to check in with them and let them know what you're doing in country as well. They can assist.
Yeah, that's good points, and made there. And I was just thinking as you were talking, the economic officers in the embassies they know the lay of the land in those countries, and if you're a company interested, talk to them, because they can kind of tell you what it looks like in their particular. They're the closest to the economic situation in a country for sure. And back on peaceful uses, assurances, that's a very important piece too, right? And yes, people get frustrated, it does get hung up, but we want to make sure if we're going to send this technology and these materials to these countries, we have to get the assurances from their governments it will be used only for peaceful purposes and not diverted. And there are countries who will divert, and we have to treat them a little differently when that happens. So, but good discussion. I appreciate that one. Okay, so I think we're ready to go to the fourth question. So this one says, where should the U.S. be focusing its global nuclear energy leadership? So, is it developing independent regulatory infrastructure, Is it supporting academic programs to provide foundational knowledge? Is it building capacity? Or is it advocating for high standards of safety, security, and nonproliferation? So let me take a minute here and look at where we're coming out. So I think we got two that are neck and neck there, so maybe that it gives us a good place to start. So, well, let me take the first shot here. So, I think as we look at going forward and implementing the U.S. foreign policy that will make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous, I think I'm very pleased to see capacity buildings up there because that's a lot of what we do, but all of us are involved in the capacity building piece, and as well as advocating for the higher standards for safety, security, and nonproliferation. And that's not just standards within our country, but standards in other countries. A lot of that we need to work with IEA on to make sure that we are creating high levels of safety. You know, the old adage of an accident anywhere is an accident everywhere. We don't want any nuclear accidents any place because it does take its toll on the U.S. industry as well whenever there's an accident somewhere. So, yeah, so I hope that that would be the two that I see going forward first. So, so I don't know. Mike, you want to take a shot at this one?
Yeah, I'll go back to the answer that I used earlier. If we're really talking about leadership, I think we've got to be focusing in all of those areas. Yeah, I agree still. I'm glad capacity building and safety and security are the highest, but we've also got to be, again, focusing on making sure that we can help countries set up an independent regulatory structure, have the right academic programs as well, because we do want to make sure that as countries are deploying this technology, that they are truly benefiting from it, that their citizens are working in the plant, so that they have the educational system to support their citizens working in the plant. Now, they can work with our academic institutions and all as well, but that is something we bring as well. We want, again, to be able to educate their citizens to work in the plant and benefit from the jobs and the economic development that come from that. So that's why we focused a lot in our educational system. Our program, we've put a significant amount of money in the university programs in the United States, and we do have even some international components of that as well. But through the last roughly 15 years, we have spent close to $1 billion in the university programs in the United States to make sure we have that capacity building as well. That's why we need to be working with these countries to, again, make sure that they have that, that capacity and training programs as well. Which I'll note, some of the countries, we've mentioned Kenya and Ghana, they actually have a really good educational system for training folks. The thing they need is they need to build a plant now so they have jobs when they come out as well. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important as well. And again, a lot of our work is focused on the capacity building. And I guess one thing I wanted to go to on the last one again, advocating for high standards of safety, security, and nonproliferation. I do want to note that all of the technologies that we're working on in the United States and looking to deploy, they are all really Generation 3+ and beyond. And to me, that's an important mark there as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I should stress, the existing fleet of Generation 2 and 3 reactors are operating safely and very effectively across the United States and largely around the world as well. But the technologies we're looking at deploying have more and more passive safety associated with them. So they have an enhanced level of safety, and that's really what we're, as far as the technologies we're looking at exporting, they are largely, again, Generation 3+ and beyond. So we're trying to, again, continue to enhance the safety and effectiveness of these plants as well. And again, I think that's come from the innovation that we are able to deploy within the United States as well. So again, I think across these areas, I'm happy capacity building's high, but we've got to focus on all of these areas if we truly want to be the leaders to help our partners in deploying these technologies going forward.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Capacity building, I agree, is important. I think we all have a part to play on that. Right now, as you know, the administration has ordered a pause on all foreign assistance, which includes my capacity building programs, while they review these things to see if they are a good use of taxpayer dollars. So we are hoping that these programs will, be found acceptable when that review is complete, and we will be able to continue our capacity building programs in this area. But it's not all for the government. I was talking to, and I don't remember who it was, but a company who was telling me that they were doing an exchange program with the energy provider in one of the countries they're hoping to sell some reactors to, that somebody from that the energy company in the foreign country will come and work in their headquarters and learn about their processes, and they are sending somebody to work there. So those kinds of exchange programs can also be very important, very helpful to U.S. leadership. When foreign officials come here, they're often telling me that they're amazed at how transparent we are, that we're willing to show them how we do things, that we're willing to take them to the national labs and show them the project development, that we're willing to take them to our universities and show them how we develop curriculum. So we've encouraged a lot of things that we don't actually even have to do a whole lot other than matchmaking for, in terms of, getting universities together to look at exchange programs or to look at programs that they can conduct, to open doors for foreign students in the United States, or for professors to do a visiting professorship at one of the overseas universities. So those kinds of things can also be important for capacity building. I've mentioned my personal view that the education piece is vital. I was in a country recently that was telling me, but we've always had a good nuclear program, and so when we build our reactor, we'll have our engineers. And I said, well, where are they now? Well, they're all working in the UAE. Thinking, yeah, you're going to be able to meet those UAE salaries. You may need a few more. So, but that we can all learn from each other. So those kinds of industrial or educational exchanges can also help. In terms of the high standards, not only is it vital that they adopt our high standards, but it's also important that they be transparent about it. One of the things we talk to other countries about a lot is what we call stakeholder engagement. Some of that means, engaging their legislators if they need laws changed to put things in place. But a lot of it is just reaching out to the public. The average Joe on the street only hears about nuclear when there's a problem. You say nuclear, they're not thinking, there's all these wonderful power plants providing electricity. They're thinking Fukushima. They're thinking Chernobyl. I have to say, when I first started working as the Deputy Assistant Secretary responsible for nuclear issues in my bureau, took the new job, had my team brief me, and about a week later, HBO released this wonderful miniseries, Chernobyl. So I had to spend the first several months on the job going around and trying to convince people, no, Chernobyl is all about the Soviet system. It does not mean that nuclear energy isn't safe. Fortunately, Mike and his people armed me with all kinds of talking points about our new generation of nuclear reactors and how they are safe by design. How we don't have to have a man in the loop to shut it down when there's a problem. We don't have to wait for somebody else to get up in the middle of the night and drive over to the plant and see what's going on. So that has helped. But that's an important piece of this too, making the public understand that nuclear reactors are safe, that they operate safely every day, that if you have that transparency, if you have those high standards, that people can trust in it, and they can have the power, and their factory can work, and they can have a job. Their kids can go to school. The lights will go on when it's time to do their homework at night, or when it's time to cook dinner, the power will work. This is a big part to play as well. And so we see that as part of it as well. So energy leadership is all of these things, as Mike has already said. It's the technology, but it's also the transparency. It's the non-proliferation, the safety, security, the safeguards, the agreements, but it's also the talking to people and reassuring them that, yes, this is how you can do it. Yes, it's the partnerships, the university to university, the company to company. If we all work together, we're showing leadership not just by the government, but by our industry, by everyone in this room. We can go and show leadership on this.
Thank you, Ann. That was a good summary there, summarizing the issues. I really appreciate that. So I think we have about 15 minutes left, but I think what I wanted to do was maybe stop a little early so that both Mike and Ann agreed to hang around afterwards to speak to folks informally outside. We do have to get off the stage here soon because they have to rearrange the stage for the next session. But I think since there wasn't a question and answer session here, they've agreed to hang around at the end and we can answer questions at the back of the room or out in the hallway once the session's over. But before we do that, may I like to turn to both Mike and Ann if you just have some closing thoughts before we leave the stage here and then maybe have a conversation with folks outside. So who wants to go first?
Just thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. I am passionate about showing putting the United States' best foot forward, showing leadership on safety, security, safeguards, my 3 S's, and I'm more than happy to work with anyone, government, company, everyone, to make these projects a reality. I think that we can do a lot of good here if we work together.
Thanks, Ann. Yep. Mike?
So I'll go back to this. I am a technical nuclear geek, I guess. And I will say, I am really, truly excited about this time for nuclear energy. It's the most excited I've been. It's been a continual building here. So I am really looking forward to the opportunities as we go forward with deployment of these advanced technologies in the United States and work with our partners and allies to deploy them around the world to, again, address issues like energy security, energy poverty, to really move forward nations and their overall security. So yeah, I'm excited about these opportunities, excited to work with different countries moving forward this. It's a lot of good opportunities out there right now.
All right, thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. So a little bit of housekeeping again before we close out here. If you remember to provide your thoughts on how this session or how the RIC is going, please fill out the feedback forms. It's always good to get the feedback. So you can see the QR code there. So please give us the feedback. We can't make it better if you guys don't tell us what you like or don't like about the way we do business here. Also, for the in-person folks, you can scan the QR code and share any of your thoughts about this particular session. It'll go to this session, and you can talk about anything you liked or disliked about this. And for the virtual attendees, you can click on the feedback tab that's on your screen that goes with this session. So with that, just let me close out just by saying that I think all of us here on the stage recognize the importance of reasserting the U.S. nuclear energy leadership. And through our continued and combined efforts and through the implementation of the ADVANCE Act, I think we can meet the goals of the Act as well as possibly even surpass them. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their attention today, and I want to thank my 2 distinguished colleagues here, and maybe give them a round of applause for their support today. And with that, we thank you for sitting in on our session on advancing U.S. nuclear energy global leadership. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And we will be at the back of the room to answer questions if you'd like. Thank you.